And we're live. Great. So, so welcome back to Creator Up. I know you've done one course with us, which is awesome, on animated graphics. Maybe you could just take a minute to introduce yourself, and then we'll sort of dive into this topic as soon as we start having a few questions and taking a look at the line and stuff.
Okay, yeah. So my name's Tim Collins. I work at the Young Turks, which is a YouTube channel. We do news and politics. I'm a motion graphics artist there. And I've been interested in motion graphics for a long time. It's a passion to create things. Uh, and yeah, I'm here to hopefully answer and maybe, well, hopefully teach some Blender information. I use Blender about once a week right now, I think. I use After Effects, Photoshop, Illustrator, and Blender on a weekly basis.
Tim, tell me, how did you first get started with Blender? Why did you start using it? What's sort of the backstory?
So I went to school for a video film major, communication arts, and I learned Maya in a course. And when I got out of college, I had that knowledge, but Maya was thousands of dollars. And my brother, who's a programmer, always tinkering, making little games and whatever, was always begging me to learn Blender because he wanted stuff for his games. And I was like, fine. So I finally gave in when I realized how expensive Maya was to buy my own license. And I started using Blender, just, text and little tiny things. And I got the job at the Young Turks 3 years ago, and I used it there for just, little things. And over time, I've been using it more and more and more and more, and now I'm actually, over this last night, I was actually rendering something out in 3D, because it takes a long time. If you're unaware of that, it takes a long time to render in 3D. Yeah, so I'm using it quite a bit now.
Okay, cool. So you started using because somebody asked you to, because you wanted to, you had a job that required you to, it's for fun, or give us a little bit more on that background.
Sure. So I had a job that had a big scope of options I could do. I just started doing art for a YouTube channel, and I basically wanted to um, create as best a product as I could on as little money as possible. At the time, the company was very small. I mean, I was getting paid salary, but not very much. And so I found Blender as an alternative to Maya that has, or Cinema 4D, that has a lot of functionality. It's a very, very, very deep program, and it's always being upgraded. It's always being developed for free. People that develop it get paid because of a foundation they're part of, but it's all open source, and I just found it as an excellent tool. It's cheap and available and incredibly deep, very adequate.
Okay, so are you using Blender as an alternative to Maya then?
Yes, yeah, definitely. And actually, I
That's
mean, I
great.
barely know Maya anymore, so I couldn't go back. That was
Okay.
5 years ago. Yeah.
So we're that people have some idea of the software and kind of how it works. And I just want to dive into a couple of the questions that you had mentioned here.
Mhm.
Um, you create something with a project or a product in mind, and sometimes that's a text or a title. So when you're conceiving it from concept to execution, where do you start with making something that's like a flashy 3D text or something like that?
So, um, if you've ever used Photoshop or Illustrator, whoever's out there, you have to plan ahead a little bit. I got to know, okay, I need this picture, I need this text, or I want it to look this big, something like that. In Blender, you really have to.
Welcome, David. Welcome. And Don has joined you. Let's welcome both Don and David. Then we'll dive back to your question. Um, Don or David, are you here mostly to listen, or did you have specific questions that we can take a note of here that we address?
I'm here to listen.
Maybe okay, to listen.
I heard.
Okay.
Listen. Okay, yeah. I was gonna say. So in Blender, we're
Hi.
talking about the process of creating in Blender. Yeah, you really need to know as much as you possibly can about your project before you go into creating with Blender. They you're really when you open a Blender project, you're starting from scratch. Like there's you can think of it as a blank canvas, but there's really nothing there. There's no shapes. There's no text. There's nothing. Um, and so you really have to know, okay, I want this text. I need it to move in. I need it to be shiny. I need something to reflect off that shine. I need a light that's going to keep it lit. I need a texture for the text. So if it's going to all be shiny, and I'm going to need a background that's not going to obscure the text itself if it does shine. So you need to know a lot before you go in, just to save yourself hours and hours of tinkering. You can tinker for hours in Blender. It can be a little painful if you don't know what you're doing going in.
Tim, do you sketch out a thing on a fashion piece of paper before you dive into the software program to give you some parameters?
I do, yes, actually. I created, or I'm sure you can download, this little storyboard. I got like 6 little screen-shaped rectangles on a page, and I'll just scribble, as long as I can understand what it is, and as long as it's somewhat proportional, and there's little arrows, and I can probably explain it to someone, but I plan it all out, and then I'll put little annotations under each box, like moves in, or shine hits here, maybe camera pushes in, any little detail that you can think of before you go in, because you'll forget it too. I forget all the time. Like, wait a minute, when the book opens, did I want the letters to come out of it, or did I want them to come down and land in the book? Like, I just had that happen a couple weeks ago, so I couldn't even remember even though I came up with the idea. So I had to go back to the paper.
So let's get really specific here so that people can kind of wrap their heads around actual project. Let's say, we were going to create a title sequence for a Creator Up video. Creator Up was the word that we wanted to sort of animate in Flash. Take us through the 1, 2, 3 steps of your project process in something like that using Blender before, during, and after.
Sure. So if it was Creator Up specifically, like let's just say it's a company. The company already has a logo. So the logo is just like it can be given to me. I would let's see. If it's for myself, I would start sketching right away. I would say, okay, I need, this is going to move in here. What if this did? I just start coming up with lots of ideas. If it was for someone else, I would ask them first, what do you see happening? Do you see this text just moving in? Do you see whatever? Do you have any vision? And right from there, I would just go into, again, simple sketching. Don't feel like you're using a program to create the thing in 3D, so you don't have to draw it out perfectly. You can just use letters for the text. But have your expectations set before you go into the program. You might have to temper your expectations once you get in the program, but just because of how much you actually can pull off. But have as much set as possible. The next thing you need to do is make sure you have any assets from the company, like the Creator Up logo. It's already set, so I need that file itself. If it's going to be like in 3D, if it's going to look 3D, it's going to be extruded out from the face of just the text. I'm going to need the logo in a vector format, so an Illustrator file, an EPS file, anything like that. And I'm going to need, at that point, I'm going to start collecting assets, colors, anything else I need before I jump into Blender. And then when I'm in Blender, I like to start with main elements. So if there's, let's just pretend it's for Creator Up, and there's a logo, and it's going to spin twice quickly, it's going to be a little blur, and then it's just going to stop. And then little text is going to appear, something like that. I would start with, okay, here's the camera, here's the frame, here's the logo. Now, where's it going to be lit from? Is the whole thing going to be lit always, or are there going to be any shadows? I'm going to start with just that main element, and then once I have that looking good, I'll work on the spin, and then the text at the bottom will have to fit, of course. Maybe I'll bring that in before we work on the spin or anything else.
So what I'm hearing that challenging for who's first doing this is to start thinking in 3D, right? And those of us who haven't necessarily designed in 3D, how do you make that conceptual transition to be able to think of the motion happening in that way? Or how can somebody, start to think about that more carefully?
If I was starting from scratch, just on my own, I think I would. Any background in Photoshop or Illustrator or anything like that's going to help you. Oh.
Updates available.
Oh, updates available. I would start with any prior knowledge you have of software, and keep that in mind. That's good. Honestly, I think the best place to get a good mindset of this sort of thing is to start looking at behind-the-scenes 3D stuff. Anything you see for movies, commercials. There are a lot of people out there that do a lot of this work, so they like to break it down and show it off. You'll really get to see all the fine points. Like when you edit an image, there's just an image, and you have to worry about pixels, and you have to worry about how it, if what you're seeing is perceivable as the actual, the original image. If you're going to manipulate it, you got to see the original image later, but it has to be believable. In 3D, you have to put a light somewhere, so you have to understand shadows. You're going to put if you're going to put skin's very hard, but if you're going to put skin on something, you have to understand how much does skin reflect, how much does skin diffuse light that hits it, how much does skin let light pass through it. So to get comfortable in a 3D workspace, I would really just I would just look for examples of people that are professionals who like to show off their work, and you'll really just start to get, okay, there's this element, there's this element, there's this element. It's fun to do too.
So let's use another case study so that people can start to grasp this or start to think about it more carefully. One of the questions I talked about was how to put 3D objects into a scene that you've already shot on videos. So there's an example. I have a video I made, and I actually want to have something come in and out of it that's 3D. How do you do that in a way that's, gonna work?
So let's see. Okay, so this example specifically, this is a really cool feature of Blender. Just the fact that it's free. If you use other free software, I mean, you're not gonna be able to create something nice. Blender has so much to offer. This Blender has a 3D motion tracking aspect to it, where you shoot a video. It can be any resolution. I actually worked on a short scene that was in 4K, and brought it into Blender, and you basically place, I think it's a minimum of 8 points on your image through the program, and it you hit play, you hit run, and it calculates the space. As long as all these points in the shot don't move. They don't move in the 3D space of the set, of whatever was shot. But when you place these points and hit go, Blender will go, okay, so none of these are moving, but the camera moves, and it figures out exactly what the scene is. From there, was that a question?
Yeah. I'm a producer. Writer, producer, director. Sometimes I shoot, sometimes I edit. I never edit anything that isn't just a simple butt cut. Otherwise, I have editors who do whatever I need in post. But I'm very curious about whether or not someone like me, who's not trained at all in how to execute animation, whether it be 2D or 3D, Do you think it's realistic for someone like me to go to Blender and to be able to go through the process without attempting suicide?
Yes. I I'm of the opinion that the more design software you use in general, the better prepared you're going to be for the next software you try and use. So coming in with any software experience at all, After Effects, Photoshop, whatever, Final Cut, Premiere, it's going to be helpful. But I learned, I learned Blender on my own. So if you're willing to put in the time and typing out like, oh, like I did this one thing, and like I got this, I got my concept, but I want this thing to happen, but then I turned this light on, and then I didn't see the light hit the thing, whatever, something like that.
How much time? How much time, Tim, do you think that something like would to do a first project? Are you talking about weeks, months? I mean, give people some idea of the time it takes.
I would say if you're working on it after work, because it's a difference if you can work on it all day or for. I would say you could finish like a text, shine, particle, background, a little depth, camera movement. I think you could do it in about 3 weeks to a month, just working. I got home. I'm gonna just pull this up and figure it out. A little bit.
Maybe a better way to address this question is, how many hours do you think it takes for a novice who has no software background, except the most basic things that I know from, doing my rough cuts? How many hours do you think it would take me to be able to produce something?
Give me a second.
He's doing the math.
I think you could say, starting from scratch, I would say between 10 and 15 hours. Well, it depends on what. If you're savvy, if you can Google, if you know how to Google well.
I don't. Look at me as the average Joe. Is this something that I can consider approaching, or is it just a little too difficult?
Personally, I just believe that people, the harder they want to try, the more successful they'll be. So if you really want to get whatever this is done, you're pushing it up. 10 hours, 15, 20 hours of work. But the nice thing about Blender is the community is it's open source, so the community is very strong. So if you're on your own, which we're all sitting at home or whatever, Mike's the only one at an office, you can learn everything there's to know about Blender if you have an internet connection. Mike and I can create a course that's going to walk you through something that's going to look great in the end. It's going to be specific. But if you just need all the information's out there. So.
If I may ask, because this is something that concerns me as well in a potential future presentation, is what would you let me think about this question further, so I don't make it more complicated than need be. But go ahead. Please
Zeke, did you have any? Zeke, did you have any? Please.
Wait, I think I know Zeke.
Yeah, you do. What's up, buddy?
What's up?
I actually weren't sure what we were covering today, but having actually sat next to Tim and actually see him use Blender, my curiosity was piqued as far as how user friendly it is, and seeing how deft he is at using it. I sort of wanted to see if that was a good option versus trying to learn something like just using something basic like an After Effects template and just plug and playing there? You know, like what the possibilities are.
If I was going to describe the difference between After Effects, this is just very specific. So if I was going to describe the difference between After Effects and Blender, After Effects is it's very, it has a lot of like presets built in. You can click, you know, add light rays or whatever. You can add effects. Just click, click, click. You have to know where they are, so you have to learn the software, and you have to learn how to apply it and put it on the timeline. The timeline works differently than video editors a little bit, so you can't, you know, whatever. You have to learn that. But in Blender, there's more and more presets are coming out. But in Blender, you have to go, okay, no, like in After Effects, you just basically have Photoshop and it moves. In Blender, you have a 3D environment, so you have to know the software enough to be like, camera, this is how you move the camera, this is how. So it's definitely harder than After Effects. It's deeper than After Effects. I think personally, I think it's as deep as Maya is. And Maya is. I haven't used that many software programs. Maya is one of the deepest software programs I've ever used.
Tim, let me ask you a question. Let's say you've developed proficiency. You've developed a basic proficiency. You've put in your 15 hours. You've done your first text. It's 3D and now you know you want to do more. Is it possible to save some templates? Is it possible to use that basic proficiency to actually crank out things much more efficiently? I mean, there must be a critical point, right? Reach your skill, and yeah, maybe you can't do something that's totally original, but you can do what you need. I think that's what a level might be starting with.
Right. Actually, so when I worked with Zeke, I made a text that just slowly came above the camera and stopped, and I actually saved that as my as a template, and since then I used it for my own website, I think. But yeah, no, I mean, you can definitely, once you put in your, you know, once you get your hands around the guts, once you know it, I mean, you can do whatever you want. It's pretty cool.
Let me if I might follow. I might follow this with my question from before, and that is, are you planning in the context of your presentation to include B-roll? I mean, cutaways of how these things work. I mean, using the basic website. Will you be building that into your, or will it only be you on camera?
Oh, we'll definitely have screen capturing. You'll see my face, you know, for the first 10 seconds, and then it'll cut away to the computer, and we'll just be on the computer the whole time.
Great. I don't know if you can answer this question. Maybe, Mike, you can. Understanding that Blender is kind of an open source situation, what about a source that is not open? What about using anything off the internet as part of the presentation?
I mean, I think I might be able to answer this. So I'll probably be using Photoshop and Illustrator, I would guess. But I mean, yeah. Oh, well, welcome.
Was that that answer your, Don, or are you referring to assets, like media assets, or?
Yes. Well, what I'm talking about is, for instance, if you were to use another, how should I put it, another area to display your work, and you were to go to a site that is not public and free, but you wanted to demonstrate, for instance, how, as you listed a couple of other apps that might apply. Do you have any? Is there any concern about licensing, or is this? How does that work in your mind, Mike?
Well, I think for the purposes of course, we probably will stick with the Blender software, and the reason for that is that we want to demonstrate the principles of 3D animation. Tim, would you say that it's fair that principles could be applied in like the Mayas or the paid services as well?
Yeah, for sure. So I I have an advantage coming into Blender in that I knew Maya beforehand. The advantage is in I know I knew my mindset was already there. I had to learn the program completely, but you can take this skill set and I mean yeah, it's all when you get into that world of software. It's all they're all kind of doing the same thing. So when you go jump.
Yeah, but you have to get
I
permission to
wanted.
show it.
Oh, I see what you mean. I've never, with Blender specifically, I've never. It's actually difficult. This is me speaking about other things, legal stuff. That I'm not a lawyer.
Right.
But I've heard of people having difficulties selling add-ons to Blender because the licensing for Blender is so open that they have to release, depending on how they put the add-on into the program, it's so open that they have to release all the code to everything they've done. Um, but companies around the world, Blender is actually based in the Netherlands. Um, the companies around the world are use Blender professionally. Not as much in the United States, but in South America, Europe, I've seen lots of examples online of companies professionally using Blender, and it is totally free.
We'll to that. I'll answer that separately, Dawn. But I wanted to jump in with Layla as well. Layla, did you questions that were specific to 3D animation, or are you just listening in?
Lala, not Layla. Sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah. No, I'm just listening in.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Great. Feel free to type any other questions that you have in the chat here. I'm going to go back to, Tim, your list of questions just to kind of get us back into this tutorial in particular. What if you were going to create some kind of a character using 3D? Is that something that, I mean, to me that sounds very complicated. Is it very complicated? And if so, how would you go about, even starting like that?
Yes, it is very complicated. I would start by admitting to myself truly how much time I have. It's a very long process, and in the world of 3D animation, 3D like let's say you want to animate a person. I think the standards are pretty high when it comes to people. If you see a commercial, I haven't watched TV for a couple of years, sign of times I guess, but I just remember seeing commercials that the person doesn't they move they move pretty natural, but parts of their body don't move. It just looks not professional. And that probably cost a lot of money, and took a lot of time to make. I think the standards are pretty high, so I've done character animation for our show, for a show on our network, our YouTube network, and it took a long time, but all the tools are in Blender. All the tools you need to do pretty much anything. I can't think of something like, oh, it doesn't have this feature because it's free. Like I can't think of anything like that. So if you have hours of time. I mean, the option's there. People spend college degrees just to learn how to animate, not even build the person, but just to animate a person. So,
right.
There's no. I would first step would be admitting that it's going to be a very big project. Okay.
So, it's on the range of complexity. Animating some text is something that's quite simple. Could take anywhere from 10 to 15 now just starting out, to character animation, which we're talking more about weeks and teams of people, generally something like that. So I'm sure there are some shortcuts here that you'll be addressing potentially in the course, but I'd like to just gather from the group that we do have here what kinds of projects we'll be working on, and then we can kind of have Tim give us a couple ideas on how to get started with those projects. So, Zeke, what kind of projects are you going to be working on?
Let's see. Immediately, we're going to be actually working on some life hack tutorials, both real and fake, for purposes of comedy. We've already shot them, and now it's a matter of adding some beautiful motion graphics that we don't have, assets we don't have. You know, obviously the tools that are in Premiere are severely limited, and you know, now we're at a point. Do we want to go? Do I need to spend some time learning After Effects in order to do it? Should I just hire somebody out, or is Blender another option?
Okay. Tim, who advise Zeke on that?
Yeah, well, Blender is definitely an option. So again, it just comes down to, and you're very aware of this. I think we might have talked about it, I'm not sure. But anyways, yeah, it comes down to time. So I would say there's two. I can think of two hurdles that sort of encompass, not hurdles or challenges that encompass most of what we're talking about. There's learning and understanding Blender to the point where you got it and it looks clean when it's done. The second is what I would call like bones. So if you're animating a person, you're gonna have like in the finger you're gonna have a bunch of bones, you know. So it's like think of each bone. You have to worry about each bone, each rotation, each movement, everything. If you're just animating text, you have to worry about one bone because you just got the text. It's just or you know or whatever it is. Maybe it just moves up, something like that. Maybe the camera moves, and that's two bones. So it's just two things. So depending on what you want to do, I think between those two, you know, proficiency and sort of understanding it enough that you can just do it. You know, you can enable your own artistic vision once you know gotten as far as you need to go. And you don't need to learn everything in Blender to do 3D text. You just need to learn the aspects that apply to 3D text.
Gotcha.
And then the other half is using that sort of the bone idea of like, you know, how much am I biting off here? And it's just one rotation, one material, a light.
Let me ask you, Tim, about a Blender hack. Say I've created a text animation that I'm mostly happy with. I like the way it feels, and now I want to just change the word or change the color or something simple for a different video. Is that something that people do? And if so, I mean, that seems like a reasonable solution.
Yeah. So each part of that, changing the text, for instance, it's as easy as typing in, you know, anything, and it will, depending on how you do it. If you do it well, it'll just dynamically switch. So you know, oh, it's in 3D, but the computer is referencing that font, that text that you've already typed in. If you want to change a color, if you know how to get in, you just click the color, you change it. If you've worked with design software before, you probably know there's parts of it when you start thinking about features that on its face look very similar, color, movement, you know, whatever. In the program, it might be really different one, but not the other. So I feel like I have to go on a case-by-case basis for this. But with text, it's pretty straightforward, I feel like.
Okay, cool.
I think you can do it, I believe.
Well, we had about 30 minutes allotted, but we have a question here. How easy is it to convert 2D and animate 2D logos for videos and from AI? Great question.
That is a really good question. So it depends on the amount of 3D-ness that you want to give your logo. So if you're taking your logo into Blender and you're just extruding it, so you give it a little bit of depth, and it just sits there, moves a little bit, whatever. It's pretty easy. If you want to take your logo like Creator Up, it's Creator Up, and it's got like this drop shadow thing coming off of it. If you wanted that to stick out into the screen, and you wanted that circle behind it to be a sphere or something, if you're actually going to do 3D manipulation, that's another skill set. So it's in Blender, but that's going to take more time to learn and more time to execute. So they're both doable, But if you're going to take just a logo and extrude it out so it looks, you know, it's not very hard.
Okay, cool. So that's good to hear. That there's some sort of simple things to do. We had a couple more people join. Guys, if you need questions, you can put them into the text here, to the chat box. Welcome, Nerdy Girl, and welcome, Lil. Do you guys have any questions?
Not right now.
Or just listening? Okay,
Yeah.
cool. So, from what I'm hearing from our session, we have most people are really just getting started, and I know if this is due to them. They want to know how to get started. It sounds like things like animate 2D into 3D. Text is a great starting point, knowing how much time that takes, knowing if it's full. So, what would you say? What'd you say?
Oh, I said text is a really good starting point.
Okay.
Before I learned Blender, I saw a coworker of mine use it, and he created an intro for a sports show we have on our YouTube network, and it was text that comes down, and as the camera rotates a little bit, text comes down, and then little particles shoot off of it, and it looked really good. It wasn't Lucasfilm, but it looked really good, and that was actually one thing that kind of inspired me. Like, oh, like Maya's too expensive. My brother's always pestering me to learn Blender. Maybe this guy was onto something. So text is a good starting point.
Cool. So what I would like to give people an assignment and something they can go off and do, and maybe email us questions that they're having as they're doing it. So what, Tim, do you think is a good starting point? Obviously, dance software, maybe to pick their project. Is there anything else that you would recommend for people to do on their first Blender assignment?
Yes, actually. So besides knowing what you want before you go in, as far as don't expect the program to present to you anything like, oh, you click this and it's shiny, or you click that and it's whatever. Know what you want before you go in. Rule number one. And then, actually, if I was teaching a course on Blender, I would suggest, and I can put this together, I would suggest learning or just exposing yourself to all the hotkeys in Blender. That was actually the first thing I would do. There's a lot of shortcuts that the program relies on that make it way easier to use. And so I don't know if this is exactly in line with what you were asking, Mike, but I would, as my first thing, I would say just expose yourself to the hotkeys and just look at them. And even if you don't understand what the words are next to the letters, just be like, just know what they are, because you're gonna hear them or see them later and be like, oh, and you're not gonna have to dig and learn every little menu and everything like that. Is that what you were wondering?
I think the point. And what are those hotkeys? Just give me a quick down.
Sure. So I'm not going to tell you all the letters because you'll never remember them. But basically, the hotkeys will allow you to rotate. You have something in 3D space. You can rotate it. You can move it. You can. It requires the keyboard to navigate around the 3D space. You use your mouse, but parts of it require holding something down, and then you do whatever. It's going to show you the way to go from there's sort of like the all your elements are visible, and you can click on one of them. Sort of like right-clicking, like, oh, it's selected. And then you hit the hotkey, and now you're in that element, and you can change it up. You've got the hotkey that allows you to search the menu system. So you hit the hotkey, and then it's like type, 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 type. Oh, I'm looking for extrude. I couldn't remember where it was, but it's right here because I hit the hotkey, and now it's the list goes on. So it's and honestly, I've been using Blender. I was gonna say I've been using it for 2 years. And I still have a list of hotkeys that I just keep. Oh, I forgot what that one was. I want to extrude this, or I want to make a new point.
AF has given a quick link to review, which I'm going to throw into the YouTube player, and so we're going to just watch this real quick. If you don't have the YouTube app in your Hangout, go ahead and do that. So just putting this in here. 1 second. And you should be able to see this video. Just 1 second, and we can figure out a plan on how you might want to do that.
YouTube.
Were people able to see that? Did people see the video that I put in?
I did not, but I know the intro.
Okay, so if you did have the in the chat box to watch it, Tim is familiar with it. So Tim, how long and how would you start?
So if I was going to do that, it includes text, which is very nice, so that's a good starting point. Actually, it's funny because the Universal Studios logo includes two things that are very good for beginners to try, and one of them is text and making it shiny, and the other one is making a globe, because the globe is it's a sphere, which is it's a very easy default shape. You make it, and then you can learn how to map an image onto a sphere pretty readily. And there are plenty of images out there in Google of spheres that are of the globe, that the Earth, that's mapped to what you need. So it's a very good thing to use. The lights that come off of the Earth, just thinking in my head right now, that's going to take a little bit more work. But in general, and the music, of course, which I love. It's very simple, but I have no idea how to compose that. Yeah, no, it's. I would start by. Well, don't copy Universal, because. Yeah, I mean, I would start with the text, and then I would map the globe. I would have put a plane in where the space is in the background. Yeah, I mean, it's a very simple project. Powerful and simple.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that it's twofold. It's the and it's also the image. Scope of this project, you would say, take you now the proficiency in Blender. How long?
Proficiency, I would say 3 hours, 4 hours.
Okay.
Just doing it.
Great.
Yeah.
Cool.
And I mean, it's gonna.
Okay, guys. So we're gonna wrap up here. Tim, thank you so much for your time. It's been really informative in terms of helping us think about how to get started. Please do go out and start on a project, download Blender, send us your questions so that we can get them into the tutorial course, which we hope is very approachable. And thanks again, Tim, for taking the time to join us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, everyone. Thank you.